Hi, and welcome to AI for UX. This is a space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations. I'm John Whalen, and I'm the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology-driven product innovation firm. So I've struggled to keep up with all the AI tools for UX research, and I'm guessing I'm not alone, and that's why I started the series. In each installment, we speak with a founder of one of the latest AI enhanced research tools to understand the inspiration for the tool and how it might benefit you, and ultimately where the whole field is headed. Just as a quick note, these aren't product endorsements. We pay full price at Brilliant for any of the technologies we use, and no one's getting paid. It's just to learn more about the technology together. So with that, let me get started. I'd like to welcome Jack. So Jack Bowen is the founder of CoLoop, and it's a tool that speeds up qualitative analysis using AI. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this and talk to me. I'm delighted to have you here.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, I guess as a quick intro, I'm Jack, one of the founders at CoLoop. And at CoLoop, basically what we do is we make it very, very simple for researchers to bring best-in-class AI to currently their qualitative research projects in 5 minutes, regardless of the language file type or where they collected their data from.
Great. And so I would love to dive into your product. So you mentioned research. So who is really the target audience for this and sort of the key pain point that you're trying to address?
Yeah, so our kind of target customer, ICP, really initially started off as research consultants working at insights and strategy firms, mainly focused on qualitative work. And what we wanted to do was basically address this issue around content analysis. So traditional content analysis is expensive and very time consuming. For something like a pharma research firm, you might be paying something like 140 quid per hour of content analysis. And in terms of how that affects your project, it's also going to add potentially a week or more to the turnaround time. So essentially, that's the pain point we sought to address. And what we've done with CoLoop is basically make it very, very simple for a large part of that process to be automated so that research consultants can minimize the amount of outsourcing they do, remain within the loop, and get back more time that they can use to focus on the strategy, the insight, the communication, rather than manual repetitive tasks like searching and summarizing that previously kind of dragged the project back and caused a lot of undue stress.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And yes, I've been the one often spending the hours doing that work, so I'm very sympathetic to the cause. Um, can maybe you can give me a sense, how is it that CoLoop is able to help with that, and sort of what would be a scenario when a UX researcher or product team might use your tool?
Yeah, so in terms of like a typical use case, you're looking for some of those more kind of qualitative details, a more mechanistic understanding of a business strategy problem. A good example perhaps might be some win-loss. Certain of your customers churn versus others that don't. And so what CoLoop really allows you to do is just to take potentially thousands and thousands of words worth of information across qualitative interviews, or pre-tasks if it was a kind of wider, more complex study, upload all of them and really start to kind of build up essentially bespoke content analysis grids very, very quickly that you can then use to start to break down that problem and understand exactly what's causing it and where it came from.
Yeah, and I look forward to showing your product in just a sec. That makes a lot of sense based on what I've seen. And so, there are some other things in the marketplace that allow for uploading of data and trying to do some analysis or different strategies. I guess I was interested in knowing kind of what your biggest focus is, or why, what sort of makes your CoLoop unique.
Yeah, definitely. So I think given our sort of genesis in the consulting space, one thing that was immediately apparent with a lot of our customers was just the massive range of different tools and platforms that they were using to really collect their data. So one thing we've invested a lot of time and effort into is actually building out a number of partnerships, integrations, and other sorts of plugins that really allow you to just bring in data from wherever it lives. And so, that covers standard platforms like Zoom and Teams, as well as much more kind of qual specialist ones like Recollective, Qualsy, Field Notes, that sort of thing, and really bring all that information together and allow you to start to analyze it. So that's kind of the first point. Second thing that we've also doubled down on quite a lot is really around accuracy. So um, a lot of the other kind of platforms and products out there that are offering AI analysis have typically come from a data collection background. So they've offered
Hmm.
some form of bidding or data collection service via some sort of documentation on a survey, and the analysis has been something that came in later. For us, by pursuing this integration strategy, we've been basically able to have an incredibly pure focus on making the analysis component of what we do really, really strong. So we work with a lot of customers on this, and we really push the limit as far as we can in previously very challenging domains like technical ones like B2B and pharma, and are actually able to offer very, very high quality, very high accuracy outputs, which are always cited and referenced back to source material that folks in these sort of higher stakes environments can really start to kind of trust.
Yeah, and so um, I guess one thing I want to hear from you too, that was very helpful to get a sense of that focus. And also, I just want to say I appreciate you trying to do one thing really, really well. And so it makes a lot of sense. And that's actually, I think, as we have done studies of tools, the analysis and insights component has been often the weakest of the different things that tools that do many things have. So I respect your position. Well, so if I haven't been using CoLoop and then I become a subscriber, how should I think about working with the tools like yours? So how might I work differently once I have it?
Yeah, so I think the sort of key difference really with when you get sort of on with working with something like CoLoop is that it's much more of a loop. With traditional outsourced content analysis, you might take all your research material, send it off to someone, and then receive this written up document, a week or two later. With CoLoop, it's a really live, iterative process. So the best way to use it is very much to kind of sit there and explore, test out ideas, intuitions, thoughts, key objectives that you want to answer, put those in, and then kind of review that content and dig into it in more detail and use that to inform your direction of exploration. I think that what it really enables you to do is get very fast bespoke content analysis. And so the way to make the most of that is very much to perform cuts of that data or investigations into it that just wouldn't have been possible before. And that's how you can kind of use it to both augment your time, but also reach levels of quality and levels of detail that just would have been infeasible before.
Hmm. And so, actually, make sure I've got this straight. So, the in CoLoop is really the AI assistant, or is that for your team to do this together? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so the co and co-loop. I think when we were sort of thinking of different names for it, one thing that was very important to us at the time was ensuring that we were building a product that wasn't attempting to replace the research function. Um, what the thesis we had and still very much have is that the kind of winning combination is the sort of researcher plus AI. And so we wanted to design something that would work very collaboratively with researchers, and so the name CoLoop sort of came out of that collaborative loop
Hmm.
with research. So the method of using it is iterative and does essentially place the researcher in the middle and give them frequent opportunities to review, to steer, to input. So what you end up with is something that functions a bit like a bicycle. It amplifies you, but you're still the one turning the pedals and the handlebars and driving it rather than being led somewhere. So you're in control, but you can go much further than you could on foot.
Got it. Well, mercifully, I haven't heard of auto-controlled bicycles yet, so that works perfectly. Um, so thank you. Well, one thing that we're always concerned about as researchers is, where did it come up with these insights or other things? And in my understanding is that it's a little bit of a closed wall, so you're providing citations and sort of getting people to the source of the insight. Is it? I just want to say, so really, how are you dealing with things like hallucinations or potential bias, things like that?
Yeah, so for us, when we when we kind of think about this, again, something that we built in early on that's kind of an important part of that collaborative, that iterative approach is really having a very deep level of citation and a simple way to kind of check and verify any of the outputs that that CoLoop is producing. So all of the outputs and themes and anything that it generates for you is always cited back to original sources. And we put a lot of effort into tracking confidence, other kinds of metrics across all of the outputs. So in addition to tracking confidence on the sources we provide, we also check for instances of where the AI chat, for instance, refuses to answer a question or doesn't find something. Those are all tracked as KPIs internally, and we basically do a lot of work, every sprint to ensure that we're pushing those in the right direction, and that researchers are able to self-assess outputs and flag things for themselves and also to us, so we can improve accuracy over time.
Mm-hmm. No, really interesting. Yeah, a whole nother conversation is how you tune it and let it learn from the researchers. And I'll let you keep your secret sauce. But I think all of us who are watching are like, okay, now I understand kind of what its promise is. Maybe we can take a look. So maybe what I can do is I can work on sharing your screen, and maybe you could just set the stage for a potential research study, sort of where we were, and you can show us kind of how this works.
Sure, yeah. So what I'm going to do is run through a really simple demo, an example of how you might use CoLoop to analyze just a single focus group. This one is the only piece of demo material that we've been rolling with for the last 18 months, which I'm sure many people who've watched any of our demos will be familiar with, which is the first time voters project. And so what I'm going to do is basically walk through how you would initially just set that up, and then move on to kind of conducting the analysis. So what I've got here is a dashboard within CoLoop. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and create this project. So I'm going to call this first time voters in US. That. I'm going to choose a region to store it in. So you can choose where you want your data to reside. You can set a scope, so which members of your organization can see it, and then hit create. The next thing we're going to do is now basically prime the system with some background information about the project. So the way that works is you basically provide it with a briefing document. So it can be like a discussion guide or a brief or any sort of internal doc that contains the core objectives and a brief description or overview of the project. And what we're going to do is extract all of that information, provide the user with an opportunity to edit that to ensure it's really good, and then use it to effectively personalize and make all of the outputs bespoke towards what you want to know about. This is sort of similar to the system message that you get in something like ChatGPT, except it goes a lot further and will also impact how the data is handled, processed, indexed, and even down to things like the transcription and how it kind of can augment and improve certain glossary terms we know are going to come up. So it's a really, really important step, and it makes sure that CoLoop actually gives you a much deeper, less superficial insight than perhaps a more kind of consumer grade tool might do.
And sorry, I'm so sorry, Jack. So this is the moment when I might share, like we were working with biologists that had like special cell, terminology for the research they're doing. So it would be in this kind of area that I would add that kind of the specialized terms and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So the models we're using do have good general knowledge of topic areas. So particularly things like healthcare. We're using foundational models that have been trained on things like bioRxiv. But you're absolutely right. So this is where you would encode things that are project specific, names of brands, products, concepts, ideas that you're testing out that are going to be in the public domain that are material to understanding the research question and providing useful outputs. So once that's done, I'm going to hit complete. And then the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and bring in some research material. These are the different formats and providers we support right now. So we've got a range of different raw formats, audio, video, text transcripts, and also a range of third-party integrations too. So these are all the platforms and third-party tools we support. So we've got Field Notes, Yazzie for WhatsApp-based interviewing, Inkling, Recollective, Qualzy for your bulletin boards, diary studies, a range of others. We're adding more and more of these as we go along. So we've also got support for more async qual platforms, more AI interview tools as well coming soon. And all of these sources can also be combined together. So what that really allows you to do is, if you're conducting some sort of multi-phase research, maybe you started with some pre-tasks in quality, and then you followed those up with some live interviews. All that information can be imported, including all the segments and demographic information, and actually joined up so that participant responses can be analyzed holistically rather than just in individual silos within those platforms.
Super interesting. No, I didn't know that, so I'm glad you mentioned it. And and the same was true with, I think you mentioned Zoom, for example.
Exactly, yeah. So those can also be brought in. You can get CoLoop to join a Zoom Teams or Google Meet call and have it
Hmm.
recorded and send it directly in.
Very cool. Well, here, I'll let you keep going. Thank you.
Yeah, so for this demo, I'm just going to throw in a recording of this focus group, and then that's going to upload. And then what we're going to do is kind of work through how you would then sort of transcribe that and get to the analysis step. So yeah, basically you can upload your raw formats from wherever they come from, and then jump into that sort of analysis.
Yeah.
Um,
It, Jack, if I remember right, there's several languages I can have those from.
Exactly, yeah. So we support 16 languages for transcription. We support 30 plus languages now for translation. We like to test all of the models and services we're using to make sure they're good enough. So we've kind of identified those as being areas where performance is kind of adequate. The In terms of the languages we support for transcription, transcription we're using is very good. It's the best commercially available transcription you can get. So it's 93% accurate in English and Spanish based on the benchmarks we've seen.
Cool.
Once that's done, you then hit complete, and you can enter an expected number of speakers. Choose one of those languages. You can set a PII redaction policy if you want to remove certain sensitive terms from your interviews. And you can also add in a list of key phrases in case you want to boost the accuracy of certain terms or words that come up frequently. So I'm going to hit continue on that, and then that's going to start to transcribe. Typically, this takes around 45 seconds to a minute. So I'm just going to jump into this project where I've already transcribed that file. Once that's finished, the next thing it's going to do is get us to name and assign roles to the speakers. So you can open this up and type in names for each of your speakers. We collect a role as well, so either researcher or participant, and actually use that to augment the accuracy by telling the model when it can use something as a quote versus something it can use as context to support the understanding of what's going on in the discussion. If you've got a big group like this one, you can also auto-label it. So you just click this button and it will go ahead and label all of those speakers for you. And then as soon as that's done, it's going to start working on a short summary for us over here on the right, which is essentially there for your benefit after you finish the interviews in case you want to debrief, send to your client or for your colleagues in case they weren't present for that one and they want to kind of get a sense of the main points and areas that were discussed. There's also a QA tab, which is basically like a synthesized version of the transcript. So it's basically questions and answers summarized together. And what that allows you to do is read it through without having to sort of pick your way through all of the ums and ahs that you get otherwise in a transcript. In terms of translation and other export options, you can do that up here. So if it's in a language you don't speak, you can also translate it to English at this point. So once that's done, the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and bring in some segments. This is where you include things like the age, demographic, customer profile, gender, that kind of thing. You can do it manually by adding them in here, or you can just import your recruitment grid or segments from another source like Recollective perhaps. So for this one, I'm just going to throw in my recruitment grid, process that, hit import, and then it's going to apply all of these segments for me automatically. So if I go in here now, we're going to have all of our segments set up and ready to go. So super simple to get started on a project. And once you've done all of that, you can basically jump in and start the analysis. So in terms of analysis, we have two analysis tools. There are analysis grids, which work like classic qualitative analysis grids. So they'll list all your participants down the left, and then they'll come with suggested questions at the top based on your guide. You can choose these or type in your own. You can apply them to segments or individual files, or just run them across everything. And the way they work is it basically goes through, it generates a summary answer for each individual participant. And then up at the top, it will produce a thematic overview based on those responses. The evidence panels I alluded to earlier are accessible here. So when you click on any of these points, it's going to take you straight through to the supporting quotes and evidence. So you can always see exactly where that research material came from. This is the feature and the sort of evidence source that we've worked really hard on, that's been benchmarked, tested, and proven with accuracy beyond 90% for technical and complex domains. And it's a really important key part of our platform that puts you as a researcher in control of this whole process, allowing you to experience the benefits without losing quality or control of where your work's going.
No, I was just going to say, I'm very appreciative of how hard you worked on this because I don't know, someone like me, when there's a natural conversation, we might have question 4 wind up being at the bottom and say it first to the next participant, and having this grid bring it together is awesome. So, yes, you're saving me time. I can promise you that. Okay.
Glad to hear that.
Sorry, I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Yeah, so these are the thematic overviews. It will give you counts for each of the themes. We've got visualizations coming soon as well, and then short descriptions of each ones that link back to the supporting evidence. They're very useful for that kind of initial 10,000-foot view, and people tend to use them to build out a structure and a narrative for their report. So what they allow you to do is very quickly get a good handle on what the main themes are and what the sort of story is that you're going to tell. We also do custom ones, which allow you to break down by different segments, if it's across markets or across different focus groups. So you can add in rows that correspond to your different segments, and then you can create questions in the same manner, and it will actually summarize the consensus of points from participants within that segment.
Hey, Jack, I actually did want to ask you a question about that. So if there was, for the by mail folks in this particular example, I don't know if it was sort of 50-50 split where half of the group said this and half of the group said something else. How does your system try to deal with that? Or is it really just say, here's what the most common response is? It's almost never 50%, but it's like 60-40.
Yeah. So essentially is the question around like how it sort of prioritizes the points that are being made?
I guess I was wondering if in the cell here, if it would wind up being, here's what the most common response was versus we heard this from, this proportion of this segment, and we heard this other thing from this other proportion of the segment.
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we do fan out the kind of analysis over each participant. And so the idea with that is to get you that diversity of responses. Mm-hmm. Qualitative research is not really intended to be statistically significant. Right. The point of doing it is to collect groups who are highly representative and to understand deeply why something's happening. There is an increasing trend more towards kind of quantifying some of these outputs, and it can be useful in a sort of sense of, was this a majority or a minority? And we've kind of offered to some extent that functionality by giving you these theme counts, but broadly the analysis and the themes it pulls out will be across everyone, and we'll try to capture a lot of that nuance. The order specifically that you get in the basic grid will just happens to be in terms of frequency, so that there's some way to kind of think about the prioritization.
Very fair. Thank you.
Cool. So there's the analysis grids. Once you've used that to get your 10,000-foot view and your plan, your structure for that report, the next thing you want to do is basically fill in the blanks and hydrate that structure, that skeleton, with lots of key details and examples and specific points. So for that purpose, what we've done is we've also built out this AI chat. This is very similar to ChatGPT or Gemini, except it's fully private, secure, it's a walled garden. It's specialized for qual, so it will explain all of its reasoning. It can understand things like segments, and again, it will cite all of its sources and is optimized for high levels of factual accuracy to ensure that all of the outputs being produced are true to your research material. And the improvements and modifications we've made there go far beyond things like just setting temperature to 0 or any of the basic settings that are possible through a consumer tool like ChatGPT. So it's very, very bespoke towards qual research, and it's kind of set up to respond in a way that research is essentially preferential to. So what you do is you create a chat. You can choose a scope for it, so which files or which subsets of your research material you want to run over. Hit create, and then you basically just ask it questions in natural language, and it can, as I say, understand things like segments. So you can do things like compare the voting experience for by mail and in-person voters. So I could tag a segment like that. And then what it's going to do is expose all of its working. So it'll show you what it's scanning for. So it's good. It's got both terms there. It's looking up each one of these individually, how much evidence it's looking at from how many people, so you get a sense of how representative it is. And then it's going to write out its response below. And then again, link all of these points right back to the supporting quotes and evidence, so you can see exactly where all this research material came from. And so you always have that traceability, that peace of mind to find the source of it. From here, if there's a good quote, you can even open these up and see the full context. And if there's a video associated with this, you can even select that, create a clip and download snippets of that video, or if it's just audio, you can get audio too, and use that to make a really compelling reel or media asset to go along with your final report. So yeah, that's a kind of quick tour of CoLoop main analysis features.
No, it's really interesting. And you mentioned your chat being sort of specialized for researchers. And I certainly saw that you can do sort of by segments and things like that. Are there other ways that I'm just kind of curious to see how we think. How did you sort of have to adjust it to make it better suited to UX researchers?
Yeah, so there's what we did is we actually started off with an incredibly simple chatbot. So it just used a very basic RAG system that you would ask it a question, it would scan a database, put in some evidence, and then kind of summarize it for you. And what we did is we kind of began with that base plate and then really started to iterate with our customers. So we added up-down votes throughout all these outputs. We have them on the chat messages too. We track things like regenerations of responses. When we got on feedback calls, we would get people to share their screen and show us how they were prompting it and what questions they wanted it to answer. And using all of that, we basically, over time, identified essentially patterns in the questions and intents people had, and built out additional branches, fail-safes, checks, all kinds of things to ensure very, very high performance on specific tasks, questions, and intentions people had. And so things like that segment feature came out of that pretty early on. People were, basically told us that the original thing couldn't differentiate between these two segments. So that was added in. Another one was sort of sourcing quotes and ensuring that those quotes were essentially factually accurate and dependent on research materials. So there are checksums now that ensure that if you ask for quotes, those are always referenced back and they're accurate. So it was kind of layered up and built on top of that based on the experiences and use cases people had through our research of them using our tool.
Are there any ways that folks have used your tool that you sort of watched that you were surprised, or you were like, oh, I hadn't anticipated this method of approaching the research, or just even using it for a different context than you were anticipating?
Yeah, so there have been a few. I think one that's come up that's quite interesting is people actually asking us to essentially temporarily reduce the level of adherence to the source material and the factual accuracy. So one of the points that that people have asked about is, can we get the chatbot to say what people might have said or how they might have responded to a particular point? It's not something we've done yet, but it's kind of an interesting example of how people start to think about it. So once they've done that analysis, moving more into like the ideation and how I can start to think about what it means. Another one we've heard as well is a request from folks to be able to actually add their client to a project within CoLoop so they can query it. That's something that we're actually rolling out soon as well. So you can give that research material a new life later on if you ever want to go back to it.
Yeah, really interesting. And so It sounds a little bit like folks were thinking along the lines of synthetic users, where if you have this data, what can what does this system anticipate that person might say in other contexts? Really interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to make sure you show us, or have we made it?
I think that was most of the features I wanted to touch on. Yeah, in terms of the only other thing I suppose to talk about here is this feature at the moment. So this is something new that we're working on for open-end analysis, which we're going to be releasing in September. And essentially, the idea there with CoLoop is that we want to kind of extend beyond qualitative interviews and start to push more into also being able to provide analysis of more statistically significant samples, particularly from tools like chatbots and multimedia surveys, which, from what we've seen at the moment, are incredibly popular, bring back fantastic response rates, but due to their unstructured nature and the high qualitative density are a real nightmare to analyze. So that's kind of another sort of direction which we're going to begin pushing in, which we're hoping to release in September. And the idea with that really is just to provide an additional set of analysis and a new kind of tool to the toolbox for everyone to really dig into their insights.
Cool. Well, here, let me go ahead and I'll just bring back the two of us. Thank you so much for showing us CoLoop. And I appreciate the speed that you can get to your insights and really kind of dig in. Very cool. Okay, cool. Well, I did want to take a sort of step back and say, you have put, and your team have put so much energy into this and dedication. And so, it's always interesting to hear what made you have that kind of push and drive to make this thing happen, because it didn't happen. It's not easy to do. So what gave you that energy?
Yeah, so the thing that really compelled, so there are two things I would say that my co-founder and I got really interested in. So we had a product before. It was a note-taking tool for students, and we really struggled to find product market fit with it. There was essentially just hours, days, weeks worth of headbanging trying to think about exactly who our customers were, what the problem was, how we acquired them. And I think through solving those issues, what we really came around to was just the power of good insights and good research work done well, and how enormously shaping and impactful it can be to a business. The interviews and the research work we did with our own customers and that analysis just rapidly became one of the most important tools that we had. And when we went through Y Combinator, it's one of the things that they tell you to do. If you're ever uncertain about how you should be spending your time, you should either be talking to customers or writing code. And so I think it kind of stands as a testament to how important that is. And that really got us interested in qualitative research and thinking about how it can be used to solve strategy problems. The second thing was a bit more of a nuanced trend, which was we saw a lot of companies emerging that were doing very interesting things with essentially organizing and providing search over data. And as that market kind of matured and got broader and more specialized towards different use cases, one thing that we saw starting to occur was businesses would pop up who would essentially form some sort of bank of data, perhaps legal text or accounting regulation, and then they would index and sell people access to that as a sort of searchable product. And so the other kind of shaping thought that we had was around what happens when you chase that to its extent. What is the final paywall? What's the most organic source of valuable information? And for us, I think we kind of collapsed onto the idea that it's the things inside our heads. It's the things that we know. And in a nice way, that kind of brought us full circle back to that experience. And we found that for a lot of companies and businesses today, their biggest challenges are really derived from trying to understand their customers, users, patients, voters, whoever it is.
Absolutely. Well, I wrote a book called Design for How People Think, so I'm very sympathetic to your cause. And also, we should talk another time. One of our big clients actually does industry and tax research and so on. And so that's a fascinating world. I didn't know it was fascinating, but it really is. Well, is there anything, as you went along and built CoLoop, often there are things that are, real challenges or, just worked really hard at. So are there any sort of achievements or milestones that you're particularly proud of and what you've been able to pull off with CoLoop?
Yeah, I think there are two things that I've been really pleased with in terms of our progress. I think the first one is definitely just that point around accuracy and the levels that we managed to get to. I think it was a very challenging problem, and it was really fantastic just watching the team come together and collaborate with customers on building something, incredibly focused that was just a big game changer and step forward over anything that had come before. I remember after we made these improvements to accuracy, going back to a customer who had previously struggled with this and asking them to rerun the analysis on
Mm-hmm.
a project that they'd done on a complex domain in pharma. And seeing their reaction and how ecstatic they were at seeing those results and being part of the process to get there was just a huge win for us. Similarly, I think the other thing as well that we're quite pleased with is also just the amount of our growth that we've managed to achieve through referral. The consulting space and the research space is it's a massive community. I think people are incredibly generous with their time and their help. And I think the levels that we've managed to get to purely off the back of well-intended customers referring us back to friends, colleagues, previous firms they worked at has
Mm-hmm.
just been fantastic to see. And I think achieving that level of trust with them to a point where people are happy to do that is also another big win we're quite pleased with.
Cool. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your future. So, there are a couple of things I wanted to ask you as sort of an expert in thinking to the future of this field. So, one is just how, the things that you can publicly talk about about how you see your product evolving. And secondarily, how, folks like us might do our research very differently and how you see this whole industry, it's sort of evolving.
Yeah, so I think I remember really early on last year there was a lot of doom tiding around job loss and the replacement of researchers by machines and the threat of AI, etc. And I think that I so I don't really buy it for a start. I don't think that that exists, and I think that actually what the future of the field is going to look like is um, probably more research getting done than has ever been done before. I think that the most similar comparison to what we're going through right now is probably what happened when surveys went online in the kind of early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
People used to run around shopping malls with clipboards and
Right.
gather qualitative data from people. I speak about this. It was probably before my time, but the sort of story progressed from there towards companies like SurveyMonkey and Typeform that blew up in the into the sort of 2000s. And consequently, now when you look at it today, um, are there less people walking around shopping malls gathering survey data on clipboards? Yes, that function is significantly diminished. But if you stand back and look at what it did to the industry as a whole, more surveys, more quant data has been collected now than ever before. And there's a huge explosion in the new different types of services, offerings, and functions that people form to deliver that. So I think we're going to see the same progressing with AI, and I think the overall studies are going to get more frequent. They're going to get deeper, and they're going to get broader as well in their reach. I think there'll be more longitudinal research, more faster turnaround projects, and bigger, better questions asked than were before. And I think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
expand into capability, not have it contract to fit around us.
Mm-hmm. And sounds very reasonably to me. You know, one of the things that we've wound up doing a lot is because of exactly what you're describing, is groups just have this mountain of data that's not well analyzed. And I do feel like tools like yours have a really interesting opportunity to unlock some of the power of what they've already collected, let alone new stuff. So, um, and yeah, I guess I was wondering about the balance between sort of really fast studies, that quick turnaround, versus more longitudinal. So thank you for touching on that. Um, well, really, actually, the last question I had was, you have mentioned very much folks like me who are sort of focused on strategic research for products or service innovation. Do you feel like this will expand to other folks? So would it be product people doing this, or really, the sales folks starting to use a tool for research? I didn't know if you felt like this is sort of the cusp of many people doing research and sort of democratizing it, or not.
It's an interesting question. I think for us, we we've kind of pursued the strategy where if you're building any product and you're a new entrant, you want to pick a niche, and you want to pick the thin end of the wedge that you can kind of grow out from.
Yeah.
For us, that's been the sort of research consulting space, and I think it's been a fantastic place to start, for all the reasons I've outlined, particularly around this generosity and this sort of help that we've had from people actively involved in solving business problems, basically helping us solve ours and understand our own requirements for our product. From there, I think the more kind of broader route I see is pushing in is kind of expanding from that towards more of the in-house teams and the client-side research teams. I mean, in terms of democratizing research, I think for us, like, if you look around any company that's making, I don't know, 10 million or more a year, has probably got some sort of insight function running that would benefit from AI tooling or analysis capabilities that would augment the work they do themselves, or the work they outsource to consultancies. And so for us, I think that kind of route forward is going to be expanding more towards some of these more in-house teams, who I think things like our open-end analysis are going to be very applicable to, as they spend more time kind of engaged in monitoring the effectiveness of their programs, rather than de novo discovery work.
Cool. Okay. No, I think that's a very reasonable perspective. Well, I did want to ask you, so for folks that have seen this and are like, oh, this looks really interesting, how do they go ahead and get started? How do you recommend they get introduced to CoLoop?
Yeah. So if you want to get started, either just head over to our website, CoLoop.ai, and you can book a demo there. Or if you fancy it as well, just ping me on LinkedIn, and I'd be very happy to jump on a call and hear more about your needs and see if we can help. And if not, I'm also very happy to recommend other tools, or help demystify the space if anyone's curious about what they should be using. We're not the best product for everything. We are quite good, very good for certain things. So if you do want to have a chat, drop me a message, and I'm more than happy to talk you through.
Cool. Well, with that, I'll say thank you so much for sharing CoLoop with us, Jack. I really, really appreciate your time. And I'll sign us off. So that's all for today. And thank you so much for tuning in and keeping up with the latest on AI for UX research. And subscribe, and also please give us notes in the comments about what other tools you'd like us to feature next. And wishing you brilliant insights with AI.